Hello and welcome to Todos Somos Marcos. We're at the Griffith Park Observatory, a favorite spot where I like to bring out-of-town visitors. I'm with one today, Mariah Darlington. Hi.
Hi.
Like my spot?
Yes, it's beautiful. I've never seen Los Angeles in one view like this. It's gorgeous.
Now, this is May 1998. Probably you know about the Actial massacre in Chiapas, Mexico in December 22nd. As part of the response to that, and we're going to get into this, the Mexican government has been expelling foreign observers, and you were expelled by the Mexican government. When was it? February 6th?
Yeah, February 10th. I
February 10th.
was the first one of this year.
Uh-huh.
I started it this year.
Well, what were you doing in Chiapas, and why were you expelled?
Well, I started living in Chiapas in '85 as a traveler and somebody. I was thinking of retiring there, and I lived in San Cristobal off and on over the years. And then in '93, I started living there for 6 months of the year, and I was living in North Carolina for 6 months of the year. And when the uprising happened in '94, when the Zapatistas showed themselves in January of '94, I already knew some Mexicans there, and I didn't realize that they were involved in any way, but I wanted to help because I saw how the campesinos, or the poor farmers, lived, and I knew that they needed to change things, and so I was interested to see if I could help in any way.
So you were drawn to the Zapatista struggle from the very beginning, as so many internationals not living there were, because I think they recognized the justice and universality.
May I have your attention?
So you were in Chiapas at the time of the uprising. You were immediately drawn to the cause. Did you find a way to be helpful to it?
Yes, actually, I actually wasn't in Chiapas in '94. That was one of the years that I missed. But I knew some people, Mexicans, who I met through a friend of mine, who were doing a lot of work in the jungle among indigenous people, and I really didn't know what that was. I didn't know what they were doing. I thought they were sort of like social workers.
Yeah.
And when I got to know this one particular person very well, I just sort of fell into being able to help. I drive my truck down, and I was able to help with using my truck. Because nobody has transportation in Chiapas, as you know.
You had the wheels.
Yeah, I had the wheels, so I was able to do some work with them there. One of the things I started doing in '95 when the army came out,
That was after the February '95 offensive against the Zapatistas. Even though the government had been in negotiations, they decided that big show of force was necessary, right?
That's right. And when they first came out, some of the villages, members of the village fled. And that was when I really started to help, because they set up the human rights people and the people that I was working with. They were setting up with the request of the people in the communities, Zapatistas. They were setting up peace camps, and it was many foreigners came to be in these peace camps as observers, so that when the army was harassing the people, when there were observers there, the army was less likely to harass them, and actually it cut down the harassment about 100% in the areas where the observers were. Well, the thing is, and the government put up immigration checkpoints on the 2 roads that went into the jungle, and so immigration would be open for maybe 16 hours of the day, or 12 hours of the day sometimes, and we would go when there was no immigration there, and this would be at night usually. So I would drive foreign observers out there, And I have to say, nowadays, the foreign observers are being targeted by the Mexican government as the people who are really behind the intellectual part of the Zapatista movement, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Foreigners don't really even interact with the people in the village, and they're only there as observers.
Was this your first experience with being a peace observer in a conflict zone?
Yes, in a conflict zone. Yes, it was. I worked in the Vietnam as a Women's Strike for Peace member during the Vietnam War, but I'd never been actually where the action was. No.
Now, did you tell us at a meeting this week that you'd been driving from San Cristobal to La Realidad basically once a week for 3 years?
More or less.
Much?
I would be in San Cristobal for 6 months, and then I would be in North Carolina for months. And when I'm in North Carolina, I would speak and raise money for buying food for the people in there. But yes, while I was down there, just about once a week, I would drive in, and I have to say the immigration never knew that I was doing it.
Well, then how did they come to deport you in this February?
Well, it took the government, it took the different factions of the government a while to kind of get their act together, is the way I see it. We always were puzzled about why, when we were in La Realidad, the soldiers, when they came through in their vehicles, and incidentally never stopped because they weren't, the truce that they signed said that the soldiers couldn't stop or couldn't come into the villages. But the soldiers took video pictures of us, the people, and the village every time they went through. And we thought, why doesn't immigration know about this? But apparently the Mexican military and Mexican immigration do not cooperate. So
that's a small favor, huh?
Yeah, not yet anyway.
Yeah.
But I have a sister of mine who's lived in Mexico for 37 years said, just wait. Mexico may seem like it's not organized, but it'll get organized eventually. And actually she kind of prophesied that I would probably be found out eventually.
Yeah.
And she was right. Well, I think what happened was I had my passport and my driver's license and all my ID stolen from me. It was stolen out of my truck. And I think that might have been a setup. I can't prove it, but it could have been. So I had to go to immigration to get papers to stay in Mexico. And it was after that when I went to the immigration office and they interrogated me for 3 hours, and then they told me to come back the next day to get my papers. And meanwhile, I think the reason maybe people who come down and they know that they're in Chiapas for a while or have been coming down regularly, I think they're beginning to look into their past and see if they have any records about them. Because the next day when I came back to get my papers to stay, I waited for almost 3 hours, and to make a long story short, I was deported that day, and with just the clothes that are on my back and my bag, as other people have been.
Yeah.
But I have to say that I was treated least badly of all the deportees that I know of.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling it's maybe partly because I'm an older person and they were treating me better, but I think also because I never confronted them. I never refused to sign anything. I never refused to answer questions. The most I ever refused, I would say I don't know, but I never refused, and it just kept going very smoothly. And they never gave me any indication either that I was being deported. I'm sure they had it in their mind from the very beginning.
Yeah, sure.
But one of the reasons that I know that they did some research on me was because when they escorted me on a regular plane, on a commercial plane to Mexico City, and two immigration officers, and one of them, people who know about this, it was the Marco Antonio, who was the head of the immigration office in San Cristobal. He took me to Mexico City, and we were met by the immigration and taken to immigration office there. And while I was waiting there, quite a few people were there to greet me, immigration and lawyers and everything. They showed me a folder, and they asked me who was this person. They showed me a picture, and it looked, I was startled because it looked a lot like me, and I thought, how could they have a folder like this on me? Well, it was my sister, who's lived in Mexico for 37 years, and she has an FM3, which is the first step that you take after, to not be a tourist anymore, steps towards being a resident. And when you have an FM3, they have a folder on you. And so I don't think they believed it. You look very much alike, although she's older than I am. And they really thought that I was probably in disguise or something.
I see.
But the fact that they had found her, I mean, there are many, many people with FM3s in Mexico, and for them to have found her folder was very interesting.
Do you think that they're stepping up their procedures here to try and get rid of as many human rights observers as possible? Is that what it looks like to you?
Yes, it does. And actually the latest news, not only that they're trying to get rid of the observers, but they're actually going in and actively breaking up these communities that
we just heard about another one yesterday.
Yeah, even two. And I mean, in general, I think the Mexican government is becoming much more aggressive. And again, I've watched it when I was down there. Over the years, over the 3.5 years that I've watched, you could feel the difference from year to year of the more military, more police in the town, in the city of San Cristobal, more in the paper about the little aggressive acts that you could see that it was a plan, that it was definitely something that they were putting into action, you know. And I think that they just gradually they do it. They don't do it, you know, in a big way anymore. I think maybe when they did that military offensive in when was that? In February of
95.
95.
That's right.
I think the world and our government here said, you know, we're horrified. No, you can't do that. You can't go in and destroy these people. So now they're just doing it very gradually. Not only the thing that happened that we read about yesterday and a few days ago, where they go in and break up these autonomous community councils that are in the communities, because many of these communities have had those before.
Sure.
They've had two councils,
Yeah.
the pre-council and the people that that have been voted in by the non-pre people. But any council that begins to set up, or they don't know about from before, begins to set up now, they're going to try to destroy them. These are, they call them servilletas, the women who make them.
Servietas, napkins.
Yes. Which of course they only know about wrapping tortillas in them. But we call them embroideries because servilleta doesn't mean that's anything to people up here. The women in Guadalupe Tepeyac, which was the first village to have to flee when the army came in 95. It was Guadalupe Tepeyac where Aguascalientes first was built. And the army came in and destroyed Aguascalientes.
Yeah.
And they fled and they lived deeper in the jungle, and they don't have enough land in order to grow their corn. And of course you have to remember that people down there live on what they grow.
That's right.
They don't go to the store the way we
No.
do. And so they have to have enough land to grow corn. Well, 2 summers ago, the friend that I work with had the idea that they could make these to sell, because the men have no way of earning money because they live so deep in the jungle. There's nowhere for them to go to work. And so they made these. And two women from Mexico City came to Guadalupe Tepeyac to teach them how to do the embroidery. And these women are non-literate. so they don't know how to read and write, and so they also were taught, they would, like the women who taught them to do this would write the words and then they would embroider them. And they taught them here. You can see this one is more primitive in a way in the wording, but this one you can see the lovely
Comandante
blocking.
Ramona.
Yeah, and that's Comandante Ramona.
They're really
She's
neat.
one of the main women comandantes.
And what do we have here? Viva el Sup Comandante David.
David from Movavi. And yeah.
That's so cool.
And I've had people say that they feel that these bring a lot of energy from the Zapatistas. And some of the, like for instance, this one says the flower of the word of the EZLN will not die, although in silence we walk. They have some wonderful sayings on these. And they're usually quotes from the Comandantes or from Marcos or Marcos. So I have quite a few of them, and I'm selling them to send money back. This is a rather nice one here. I'm sending them to send money back to buy food for these people. And this is the mountain under which they live now. The mountain is sort of this shape. And
distinctive.
yeah. See, it says to be a Zapatista is to encounter the bad government. Yeah.
To face the bad government.
Is to be against the bad
Against the
government.
bad government, yeah.
So, in your travels
So-
back and forth to the villages, you've gotten to know some of these people, I imagine.
Yeah, I
and,
have.
To get a deeper sense of what they're looking for and what they're hoping to achieve.
Yes. Well, of course, when you know them and you see their lives, I mean, they barely have enough to eat. And some of the village are better off than other villages. But some of them are deep into the jungle and they have no access to the rest of the world. And I know this year was the first time when I brought money to buy food for this village. I sort of adopted Guadalupe Tepeyac. The Comandante said, you know, there are villages that are much worse off than this village that are 3 days walk from the road that nobody knows about except us. And we would appreciate it if we could be the ones to choose, not the Comandantes, but the whole community of 1,111 communities in the area, that they would choose who needs the help, because I mean it's getting worse and worse because when the soldiers are in there and they have the circle of the military, and it is squeezing the life out of these people.
What is going to happen? What do you think? Do you think that this movement will be crushed, or do you think that this movement will be able to transform society, or is there something in between?
I'm very optimistic about this movement myself. I think it's important to understand that the movement isn't just the Zapatistas in this area. It's all over Mexico, and it's a very strong movement because of their philosophy. They don't want to overturn the government. They want to change what they consider a bad government. They want to have develop their communities. They've already started developing their communities. For 14 years, the teachers have been coming in to teach them, so that now the children, who are now 17 and 18 years old, have been to school. And they're the teachers now. They've learned to teach. Their parents can't read and write, but gradually, and they're learning other things too. They're being the communities are bringing people in from outside to teach them all kinds of skills that they need. And there are things like farming to diversify. So I think it's a very strong group. And I think that their philosophy, their worldview, they're not just interested in themselves. They're interested in all indigenous people and all people on the margin of the global economy, who don't fit into the global economy, and how are we going to survive the move towards neoliberalism.
And I think a lot of us feel that, that the issues they raise confronting that system have implications for our communities here in the States and for people in communities all over the world. Well, now that you've been kicked out, what are you going to do?
Well, thank you for having me here. I hope to do more of this.
Okay, great.
To educate the people, and so people will know what's really going on. Because they're amazing people, the Zapatistas.
Mariah, this is a photo you took at the memorial for the Actial massacre victims, is that right?
Well, actually, it was a funeral.
A funeral.
It was a funeral. On Christmas Day, I went up in a caravan with Bishop Ruiz and some human rights people, and there was a procession with the people and the victims of the massacre and they walked several kilometers to Actial and they buried the people. It was very moving, very stressful, but again the people who lost, like this little boy whose picture shows, they were all in shock, I think. So it was only 3 days later.
Sure.
But it was a lesson to see how these people continue, and they after this terrible thing had happened to them. 15 babies, children, 21 women and 9 men were massacred, and they were defenseless. And Bishop Ruiz reminds us this was the 143rd massacre in Chiapas since 1994 uprising. But it was just the biggest at one time. But it was a beautiful time in a way, because the people who lost their families and friends and neighbors, they're so dignified and they seem so contained. You know, they were mourning, but they did what they had to do. Like, there were men, they took turns digging this grave. They dug the graves, 50-foot long graves, 2 of them, in the coffee plant, in the coffee cafetal they call them, and it was a very moving experience. I'm really glad I went there. Now, almost every month, I think they have a memorial service. People go up to there on the day of the massacre.
So has that event become a new symbol and a rallying point for the people, would you say?
Yes, not only for the people, but it seems like that is now sort of the checkpoint for news articles too. They always talk about the massacre of Actial. They refer to that, which is an interesting twist. But you know, the thing is that they're only part of it. I mean, there are somewhere between 15 and 20,000 refugees in their own land because of the paramilitary. The same kind of people who committed the massacre are going into villages and threatening the people, and the people flee, and they're afraid to live in their villages because of the paramilitary, who are trained by the Mexican military and and given guns by the local PRI people, and this is a proven fact. And they have to flee and they have nowhere to go. They go deeper into the mountains. But now there's a community, a Zapatista autonomous community called Polo, where they have taken the people in. They have more than 10,000 people, and they have no food, nothing. So, you know, the massacre of Actial is just one thing. I mean, there are terrible conditions, and the government goes in and destroys these communities that we were talking about, the autonomous communities, and they won't go into the communities where it's known that the arms are kept for the paramilitaries. They haven't touched those communities.
Because those paramilitaries are really serving the power structure in what's been called a classic low-level counterinsurgency war, similar to what the authorities in El Salvador, Guatemala, and other places use against their own people to try and break down their will to resist and improve their society, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. You put it very well. Yes.
And to destroy them in ways that the government couldn't do with their own troops, because they want to be able to deny that.
Exactly. Zedillo says, "I'm so proud of my boys." He gave us.
But he doesn't mean the ones that hacked up that woman.
No, of course not. But he means his soldiers, and that's one of the new counterinsurgency techniques, is that the army's hands are clean as far as massacres and doing anything directly. So they train the paramilitaries to do all the dirty work, and then the soldiers just threaten and scare everybody to death, and disrupt things. And they disrupt things in ways like in the Actial area. the soldiers moved in and camped in the middle of the village, and they camped around the only water source. And then they used that water source from the cells, but they polluted it, and so when it ran out of the village, it wasn't usable.
Yeah.
And then there were other places where they would go and camp in a village for a while, and they would use one of the houses for a latrine, and they would dig a latrine in the house, and with the people, if they were able to come back, that was unusable. So those little things are gradually making life impossible for the villagers.
Okay. Well, we have to get as many people down there to be witnesses as possible, and even if they get a free trip home like you did. Thanks a lot for talking to us,
Well, thank you
Mariah.
very much for having me. It was a pleasure.